We're here at Ubisoft Toronto, and we're getting a chance to go a little bit behind the scenes of the latest iteration of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Speaking today with Mel, the narrative director on Assassin's Creed. Thank you so much for taking the time. Alexios or Cassandra?
Everybody asks me this question. It's hard. They're my babies. I like them both.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll say Alexios this time.
So it's interesting to look at kind of the history of Assassin's Creed from a narrative lens. They've had a very clear, linear, historical angle. This is the first time where choice has a huge impact in how the narrative is built and even how kind of the world is built around choice. What were the conversations that happened, months, maybe even years ago, to say Assassin's Creed Odyssey, we're actually going to get choice this time. The characters are going to define their own narrative.
Right. Well, I think, sometimes it feels like it comes out of the blue. Like, I think I came off Syndicate and I was like, it would be great to have conversations with people. But increase that relationship between the player and the game, have them not interact only in moments of action, but in moments of story as well. That was a big thing for me. But I think Origins had already taken it a step towards, a full RPG. They definitely took steps in creating this, and we just wanted to push it even further. So it just felt like a natural evolution for us.
And that ability to have choice also leads to multiple endgame states. In my understanding, this is really the first time where when the credits are rolling, my experience of playing the game can be vastly different from Anton's. There's already so many variables in an Assassin's Creed game that's so big and so dense. Narratively, that choice to make the family unit matter for the end game, how did that come about? When was the choice made that we're going to have so many different endings and options?
I think, we had been talking so much about choice, and we're letting you choose your character, and we're letting you play the character the way you want to play it, and we were mapping out the story, and we're like, oh, you can make a choice here, and it's going to impact this, and then we were like, well, you can't just have one ending. Cool, thanks for making choices. They don't matter. That's not what we wanted. So we were in a meeting one day and we were like, there's gonna be different endings too. It's not as drastic as in one ending you're on the Earth and the other ending you're on the moon. But it's a big deal for us because we've never had multiple endings before, and it's a big deal for us narratively on this team just because this is a very personal story about family, and where those things can go wrong or very right is always very intriguing.
Do you have a canon? Do you have a canon ending that you think is just that's the story of Alexios, that's the story of Cassandra? I
think an actual canon was set in place. I think that they have announced that the novel is the canon of the story. Of course, I love all of the endings because they bring something different to the experience. And yeah, I have my preferences, but you're gonna have to play the game and then we can talk about it.
Finally, romances. So that was included, and I think when we first learned about romances in this game, it came in a very interesting time for video games when so many other big-budget games that were known for providing choice were slimming down. All of a sudden, Assassin's Creed is giving you chances to buddy up with people. Do you, again, the choice of romance in this sort of game, where's the line between the funny, servicing the old woman, to helping out, the daughters of Artemis sort of thing? Those sort of lines within romances from a narrative perspective, where was the line between funny and actually meaningful for you?
Well, it's funny you bring up when it was announced, and it was always really scary for us to, it was scary for me to think about how we were going to incorporate romance in the game. I pushed back against it for a while because I was like, if we're going to do it, we have to do it a little bit differently. And, we did have to have that line between what's funny and what's meaningful. And it couldn't just be the heart you click and then all of a sudden it's there and you're making out with somebody or something like that. So it needed to be something meaningful, and we had to really put thought into this process. And so for us, it was intimidating devastating to do that because it's the first time we've had choice-based romance in the game. It's always been part of like the main story, but we wanted you to have a choice in it, and we wanted that that no matter what kind of player you were, there would be options open to you. So that was where it really hit home, and that's when we were like, okay, this is definitely something that we had to do. And then of course it was scary on the world stage being like, yeah, we have them. They're experimental, but they're fun. And yeah, we wanted to strike different tones with different characters. Romance was really less about I don't know how it would have like the hugest impact on a global scale, and more about how it impacted these individual characters that they were meeting, how their relationship was impacted with yours, and how they changed as people, and so all of the different quests are contextual based on these characters and the stories we wanted to tell with them. So I am quite excited for the players to be able to service the old lady and meet the daughters of Artemis. And beyond that as well, and looking at subverting romance too a little bit. There's a specific character that I won't name where we looked at, sex is a really big part of this character's life, but how can we develop a relationship with him beyond that?
Very interesting. So the choice to have fully, same-sex relationships and romance scenes, that choice early on, was that something that you really wanted early on when romances were announced, or is that something that was a little bit a tenuous choice later on?
No, it was definitely something that we had built into it from the get-go. These romances were definitely going to be, if we were going to do romance, we were going to do it right, and we were going to do it so that no matter who you played and no matter who you were, because it is our belief that, you shouldn't feel excluded when you play a game, like a game should be for whoever you are, there's something in it for you as well.
That's great. So finally, just my final question. The thing that I really love about the narrative direction of Assassin's Creed is not always that you're trying to depict a moment in history, but it seems to be you're trying to tell stories from the perspective of people that are actually living in that history. So the myths that we see can kind of be transfixed within reality when we get to play it. The line for you of developing a narrative that flirts between authenticity of the time and the mysticism, the mythology, for you, just very quickly, because I know we don't have a lot of time, this is my biggest question, where did you find that line between the two, I guess, pillars of narrative development?
It was hard because, myths is such a huge part of this culture, and so we were very lucky to be able to build off of, a reality that is there, like the culture that has been created because of these myths, because of these stories, and how that has become the history we know today. But we also get to flirt a little bit with the first civilization and how myths are going to fit in a more fantastical way, and how those ideas tie together, because that's also a very important point of the lore. One of the biggest concerns from the player base was like, how was Odyssey going to fit in with the lore as a whole? And tackling myths in history was a huge part of that, because history is a huge pillar. Mythology and that sci-fi element to it is a big pillar, and then also the fact that we're trying to make a fun game out of those two, makes for a lot of really interesting discussions and a lot of really cool stories, actually. So I'm excited for people to check it out.
There we go. Thank you again, narrative director on Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's an incredible game. Make sure you check it out.